started. Welcome everyone. I'm really pleased that you could join us for our session today on behaviour change programming for NTDs and the guidance and case study series that we're developing. I'm going to kick us off and do a little bit of an introduction to the work of the NNN WASH Working Group Behaviour Change Task Team, what we're up to and who we are. And we'll do a bit of an icebreaker exercise to get us warmed up and to introduce you to some of the platforms that we'll be using in the session today. We'll then hand over to Geordie, who's going to give us a bit of a rundown and introduction to the toolkit that's under development. And we'll do a bit of an exercise together. We're keen to get your input into some of the materials that are under development. And then we will have a bit of a presentation on some of the case studies that are being developed and again, a bit of an exercise together around that topic. And then we'll wrap up and talk a little bit about the next steps. Thanks again for joining. We're really looking forward to chatting with you today. Before we get stuck into it though, I do have some housekeeping notes to read out to you. So bear with me while I read these to you. So you will notice that once you've joined that you've entered with your cameras and your microphones muted. Please keep your audio muted to help background noise, keep that background noise to a minimum throughout the call. If you are invited to speak, please unmute yourself by pressing the microphone button in the bottom left-hand corner, and feel free to switch on your video so that we can see your lovely faces as you do talk. We will have some breakout sessions in the group today. So during the session, we will be instantly transported into breakout groups by the wonderful MYT team. There's nothing that you need to do as participants. You'll be transported instantly by the MYT team. Once you are in the breakout room, again, please turn your video on and off using the left-hand corner button and unmute yourself if you would like to speak and participate in the discussion. And when you aren't speaking, if you could please keep your microphones muted to keep the background noise to a minimum. Once the breakout room work has been completed, there will be an automatic transportation again back to the broader group. We will get a 60-second warning before that happens to make sure that we are alerted to that. And just also note that we do have the chat function available. If you have any questions or comments throughout, please use the chat function on the Zoom platform. You can find that at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your view. And if you do have any technical difficulties at all during the session, then please use the chat function again to communicate that, and the MYT team will assist you as soon as they can with that. You can also email them via the admin@nnnevents.com email address. And thanks again to the MYT team for all their assistance. So now that we've managed the housekeeping, I just want to introduce you briefly to the team. So we have myself here, Sarity Dodson. I'm the Research Director at the Fred Hollows Foundation and co-chair of the Behaviour Change Task Team, which is a task team of the NNN WASH Working Group. We have some other fabulous members on the call which will be guiding us through this workshop today. Geordie Woods is the co-chair as well of the task team, and I'll get him to introduce himself in a moment. The fabulous Lauren is also supporting us as coordinator of the task team, and we also have the wonderful Kimberly and Naomi. But I might just ask each of them to say good day, say maybe a word or two of introduction. Geordie, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Sure. Thanks, Sarity. Good morning, everybody. yeah, looking forward to being with everybody on this call on the second day of the virtual NNN. Yeah, and I think mostly just looking forward to getting everybody's input on the work that we've been doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Geordie. Lauren, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Good to be here with you all. I'm Lauren Abrams, and I'm at the Task Force for Global Health in Atlanta, Georgia. Looking forward to today's session.
Wonderful. And Naomi.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see everyone on this call. And yeah, I'm from Nala. I'm in Tel Aviv, Israel, and we're really excited to see what thoughts you have on what we've been working on.
Great. And Kimberly.
Hi everyone, I work at the End Fund and I'm based in New York, and I'm also really excited to see what everyone has to contribute and add to our conversation.
Great. And we also have Yael and Leah joining us to assist us with moderation of some of the groups today. Leah and Yael are the co-chairs of the WASH working group. Guys, do you want to say hello? Perhaps Leah, if you wouldn't mind going first.
Good afternoon, morning, evening, everyone. My name is Leah Wolgamuth and I work for Sightsavers, and a big thanks to Sarity and everyone on the task team for pushing all this work forward.
And Yael, over to you. Lucky last.
Always am. That's what happens when your name starts with a Y. Hi, everyone. I'm Yael. I'm based at the SCI Foundation in London. Great to be here.
Thanks, guys. And so in addition to the small group of us today, we have quite a large contingent who are part of the broader task team. Because there are quite a number of people interested in this space, we have created this two-tier system for our task team, so that we have a small group of us that meet quite regularly and deal with the day-to-day operations of the work that we're engaged in. And then we draw on the expertise of this broader group of stakeholders as we move forward. They're instrumental in helping us, for example, with writing activities and providing us with a steer and some guidance and helping us to make decisions along the way. So we really value their input. If you'd like to get involved, please reach out to Geordie or myself. We'd be happy to add you to this fabulous list of people. So just to give you a brief introduction to what the task team's kind of set up to do and what we're focused on at the moment. We have three main objectives at the moment. One is to develop a set of logic models for some of the key NTDs that provide us with a clear sense of what are the targets of change that we're trying to create in programs around NTDs and behaviour change, and what some of the moderators of that behaviour, those things that we need to influence in order to change the behaviour along that pathway, and what the inputs and so on are. So we're looking just to map out those logic models for several of the key diseases. And alongside that, I identify some common indicators that help us to measure change across that pathway. And then alongside that, developing a set of preferred practice guidance. So a toolkit or a resource, which is what we're keen to talk with you about today. And important to note, and we'll talk a little bit about this a little later, but the work that we're doing is closely linked to the work that the broader WASH working group has done to develop this WASH and health working together toolkit in collaboration with WHO. So we're going to pause there and keen to get us moving and start to interact. So, and introduce you to Mural. Now, some of you may be familiar with this platform. It might be new to some of you. Paris is going to pop into the chat box this link. If you wouldn't mind navigating to the link. We're keen just to get warmed up a little in this session and learn a little bit about who's on the call. So I'll just click the link and we'll navigate to this Mural board. You'll see that there is a map attached to the back of this Mural board, and what we're keen for you to do is to add onto this Mural board your names and in the particular locations that you're joining us from around the world. So you'll see that on the left-hand side of your screen there is a tool bar, and there are several functions allowable in this toolbar. One is sticky notes, so you can gravitate to the sticky notes and drag and drop across to somewhere you might be located in the world. You'll also note that there is a comments function on the top right hand side if you navigate there, and if you right click on the screen, you'll see a list of functions pop down, one of which is to add comments. You can also add a comment if you like in this way. So it might just give you a few minutes to pop down your names and perhaps any other little messages that you might want to write to get us warmed up and started today. Wonderful. Got lots of visiting animals. Some I'm familiar with, some names I'm familiar with, and some I'm not. Got some visiting sheep and rams and turtles and owls and all sorts. Thanks everybody. It's lovely to see who's on the call and whereabouts in the world you're from. So if we navigate now back to the slides, I'm going to hand over now to Geordie, who's going to introduce us to the Behaviour Change Toolkit and why we're developing it, and to give you a little bit of a orientation to that resource. Your input. Over to you, Geordie.
Thanks, Sarity. Yeah, it's oddly calming to watch all of these visiting animals all over the screen. I could probably just sit here and watch this all day. So I'll try not to be continually distracted by the really cool screen over there. And as Sarity mentioned, this is a piece of work that this task team, and you saw all of the really amazing members of it, have been working on. And I think that we had really hoped to have this set of guidance ready a little earlier, and maybe even by this conference, but because we're all virtual, I think that the reasons why lots of things have been delayed are fairly clear. But just to give a bit more background on this toolkit, as Sarity mentioned, it's building on to the WASH and Health Working Together toolkit that was developed by the WASH working group along with the WHO. And this kind of was based on feedback that we got from the 2019 NNN in Liverpool, where a lot of the participants sort of described the need for more of a supplement to behavior change in general, in terms of specifically like what are the specific programming elements that need to go into planning, monitoring, evaluating, everything else. And I should mention the 3 objectives that Sarity put up there before. Maybe stick on this slide for a minute. We're hoping to capture all 3 of those pieces into this set of guidance. So not only is it guidance, but those logic models as well as the indicators will form a part of it. So again, I think that the purpose of this is to provide resources and guidance to practitioners as well as folks interested in behavior change. And I think beyond just NTDs. The format of this, and that's kind of the part that Yael and Leah are going to help us discuss a little bit more, is it's intended to be a series of information sheets. There's always an interesting balance trying to strike how much is enough. You don't want a tome of manuals, but you do want enough meat to get behind. So it's a series of information sheets walking you through a guidance. And then in terms of what the overall toolkit or resource is, that there are a lot of toolkits out there. I think that we recognize that there are a lot of toolkits out there, and what we want to do is provide, perhaps what we don't want to do is provide a definite set of this is what you should do or recommended programs, given that successful behavior change really is context driven and specific to the communities and people that we're targeting. However, we do want to provide a set of specific sort of guidelines to go through, and we want to, I think one of the big pieces that has been missing is this idea of what are the behavioral determinants and how do we measure and talk about this with the broader NTD sector, with our other development partners. I think that behavior change is such a complex set an area of interventions from environmental to community and individual levels that it's oftentimes hard to communicate that. So that's what this set of guidance is really seeking to do. So the next slide, please. Again, this is building very much from the WASH and Health Working Together toolkit. In the back of that toolkit are a number of specific resources. Resource number 2, for example, is a resource that builds on what are the behaviors linked to NTDs and how do we want to focus on that. And so this toolkit really is based on the feedback that we've gotten back from this toolkit, is building on those resources and taking from, okay, we know what the behaviors are, how do we address each of those, and in what context and what types of interventions could we do? Next slide, please. So the toolkit itself is broken into, Sarity, can you give me the next slide? Thanks. The toolkit's broken into 2 main parts. There's a part A or part B. I think that, as we're trying to get feedback from this group, we're certainly welcome to other recommendations, but for now we'll call it part A, part B. Part A is really an introduction to behavior change programming and the methodologies and theories. And as we mentioned, there's lots of theories in this space, and we're trying to provide a synthesis of where that's coming from. And then part B is sort of the step-by-step from beginning to end, depending on where in the cycle you are. And so in part A, there are, and I won't read all of this, but the things that the three main info sheets in that part really break down what are the behaviors and what are the behaviors we're targeting, and what are the influences that could influence those behaviors. The other piece is specific elements to social behavior change programming. What are the specific behavioral approaches we can be using? What are the key considerations for designing these things? And this group has developed a set of key practice principles, again, building from the Washington Health Toolkit, some very specific practice principles for developing that. And then the third piece is this idea of the theories of change and the indicator sets. Again, sort of back to those other first two objectives of, what are the sort of the pathways of change, and how do we influence that, and then how do we talk about it and measure it. And then the second piece, part B, is the remaining 10 info sheets. And again, I won't read through each of these, but I think one thing to highlight is, starting from really defining what the target audience is and what are the behavioral specifics, what are the behaviors you're trying to influence with regards to the disease or set of diseases that you're working with, or hygiene behaviors, for example, all the way to the development of the program materials or the interventions and implementations of that. I think a couple of the steps that are unique to this set of info sheets that I don't think are often included in sets of behavior change guidance are some of the steps like number 9, developing a communication and engagement plan. I think that's a step that's oftentimes left out and happens after the fact. And then the other piece, sort of in the middle of the info sheets, 8 and 9, is trying to make sure that you can fail fast, that this is an iterative process, and making sure that oftentimes I think people call it pre-testing, but making sure that the interventions are crafted in such a way that you can be nimble in terms of measuring and monitoring and getting the intervention or interventions right. So that is a very quick and brief overview of a large body of work and a huge thank you to everybody that's been working on this, and it's a continued effort. And as Sarity mentioned, if you're interested in being part of this, please contact myself or her, and we would love to have you. So the last piece that I'll kind of go over is the proposed structure for each of these info sheets. And so each of the sheets we're hoping to have fairly concise, 5 pages or less, and really having clear headings or bullet points to kind of map each of the info sheets out with specific case studies or examples. Again, at least for me, having a context or an example is often very, very helpful. And then the next sort of principles of our structured layout sheets is highlighting the importance of whatever that step is, and trying to be very succinct and clear about how to get from point A to point B, and the individuals you need to have involved. For example, in the creative process, it's not necessarily a group of epidemiologists. You need to design creative materials. And then sort of the last 2 points are any sort of key considerations or lessons from other programmatic insights that we have. And I think, again, this isn't something that's brand new in the space, so there's a lot of guidance out there. And so what we're trying to do is also provide references and annotations to other references and guides to not replicate other guides that are out there. So that is our proposed structure, and we're sort of midway through the process of this. But with that, I think we are going to break into a breakout session, which I will let Sarity explain a bit to us. And thank you very much. And I'm going to go on mute now.
Awesome, thanks, Geordie. Thanks for walking us through that. So as Geordie said, we have a bit of a team, an authorship team working on populating those info sheets with content, and reviewers lined up to support us to ensure that we're checking them and ensuring that they're laid out as per the principles that we've set, and clear and concise and so on. But as we are kind of midway through, there is still opportunity for the NNN members to help us to shape what we're producing. And so we wanted to take the opportunity of this workshop to get your input and insights. So again, Parise, if you wouldn't mind dropping this link into the chat box. And if each of you wouldn't mind navigating to this mural board, you will see that we have laid out some of the content that Geordie has just presented. So summarising the two parts of the toolkit and the information, broadly speaking, that will sit within each of those info sheets. Some of those notes around the principles of its structure and presentation. And then also a space for you to make some suggestions around things we really need to be considering now during development, that we need to plan for in order to ensure that people are in fact using this toolkit and taking it up and you know, using it as a reference tool as they design and implement programs. So if you wouldn't mind just spending a few minutes just reflecting yourself on some of the suggestions and comments that you have for us, we'd really love to get your insights. And then what we will do, I'll bring you back in about 5 or so minutes, and we will then break it into some small groups to have a bit of a discussion around some of this as well. But we just wanted to give you an opportunity first to read through this and engage with it a little, and to provide your initial comments and thoughts. So we'll just give you a few minutes to do that. I'll place myself on mute. And some of you may have discovered this already, but if you haven't yet, please note that you can zoom in. If you are zoomed out and you're seeing the full board, some of the text is very small. So please know that you can zoom in so that you can read parts of the board much more clearly. Wow. It's really is quite mesmerizing seeing you all work busily away, adding your comments. I'm super excited to read some of them in more detail. Perhaps just finish the comment that you're working on, and then we'll navigate back to the slides. We'll be revisiting that board in just a moment in our breakout groups. Thanks for all of those comments. So now what we're going to do is just break up into some smaller groups to perhaps delve a little deeper into some of those sections that you've just been contributing to. So the first group is going to focus on the scope of content of the toolkit and have a discussion around the content that's been proposed, and read through some of the comments that you've already made, but just have a discussion around whether or not there's some things that perhaps need to be added or removed or reimagined. We're keen for the group perhaps to come up with 1 to 3 recommendations that you might have for the task team of things that we might strengthen about the proposed content of the toolkit. And then the second group is going to focus on key considerations for the presentation and structure. Accessibility and presentation can be really important, and we're keen to get your feedback around how we might make sure that the presentation and structure really optimizes engagement and use. So that team's again going to see if they can come up with 1 to 3 recommendations for the task team. And then the third group are going to focus on increasing uptake and use. Any suggestions that you have on things that we can be doing as a task team now and then after launch to make sure that people are able to engage effectively and use the toolkit. So MYT is going to magically now transport us to breakout rooms, and you'll be in the able hands of either Leah, Yael or Lauren to talk you through this exercise. Over to you, Roz.
Welcome back. You've just come back to the main session. Breakout rooms are now closing. Welcome back. Breakout rooms are closing in 26 seconds, so we should be joined again by lots of people. Hi, Lauren. Breakout rooms are closing in 7 seconds, so hopefully people should start returning.
Perfect.
It takes a little while, I'm afraid. Hi, welcome back.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys all had an interesting conversation. We certainly did in our group. Thanks for everybody for their contributions. We have an opportunity now just to hear back from each of those groups and perhaps if each of the groups could perhaps share a couple of highlights. So I might hand over first to group 1.
Sarity, thanks. Yeah, so we had a lot of rich content in our group and couldn't even begin to get through all the sticky notes. So thanks to those that provided them. I think one of the main things that came out of the group and that people were keen to see more of is just highlighting how the toolkit will be participatory in nature and how we'll be working with the communities kind of in every one of those steps. It came out as something that people wanted to highlight in the introduction section, and then also kind of along all the steps within the second section. So I think that was a really good suggestion and seemed to be echoed by most of our group. There was also some more input about providing some other resources from for M&E that I think would be really useful and kind of keeping it practical and applied. So I think there's a lot more we can gain from the sticky notes that we have, and that participatory part was just one thing that we wanted to highlight.
Awesome. Thanks, Leah. Yael, do you want to give us a bit of a recap of group 2?
Sure, thanks, Sarity. Lots of great suggestions from our group. Firstly, that we should probably have this toolkit in various different formats that are complementary to one another, because it's useful to have both print and digital versions of materials so people can use them flexibly, print out different sections, etc., although probably not a mobile app just yet. We talked a little bit about language, both in terms of French, English, Spanish, and other implementation languages, but also the accessibility of the language. So we need to have a very clear idea of who's going to be using this toolkit and what sort of technical background they may have. So that's a bit of work that we need to do as an author group. And we also talked about having auxiliary materials such as videos, presentations, both kind of taking people through the different parts of the toolkit, but also for showcasing the case studies as well as how the toolkit is being implemented in practice. And then lastly, I think we were starting to talk about some kind of a user experience process to get the outputs right. And that's something we'll discuss going forward. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Yael. And over to Lauren for a recap of the third group. Lauren, are you able to share with us some high-level reflections?
I think we may have lost her there. Do you want to open the breakout groups, or are you?
Is there anyone else from the third group that might be able to just give us a few pointers on what they discussed? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next session.
Well, thank you.
Sorry.
On from the task force. Some of the key items that we discussed in our group were engaging with communities of practice that are in existence in order to increase uptake across endemic country researchers. Another issue or barrier that was discussed was the timing and the amount of human resources that are available. So launching the toolkit in a very accessible way at the same time as countries would be working to redo their work plans for the year.
Wonderful, thank you. And thanks for all those contributions, and I'm looking forward to having a good read of all of the sticky notes and comments that people have added to that board. I think all of your contributions will help enormously as we shape this toolkit and this resource ultimately for your use. So thank you for that, and we'll keep the mural board open if throughout the course of the next day you are so inclined to add some further comments, then please go ahead. We welcome them. So we're going to move on now to, I just want to talk you through another element of the toolkit. We are really keen to make sure that we can bring some of the steps and principles and so on to life through presentation of some case studies. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit of what we've done to date in developing this case study series. And again, we're really keen to get your inputs as we move forward with this component of the toolkit. So just firstly to introduce you to the role of case studies in the toolkit. We think these are going to be really fundamental, as I said, to ensuring that there is life breathing through the text and so on of the toolkit. So the purpose of the case studies is to keep the guidance really practical and grounded in the reality of the work. Also to assist us to illustrate some of the key messages or the processes and principles that we're trying to highlight. And also as an opportunity to showcase some of the work that's going on across the sector. We plan to kind of use them throughout the toolkit will provide, you know, brief overviews of projects or elements of projects that help us to illustrate those messages and so on. We're expecting at this point that there'll be, you know, relatively succinct case studies, perhaps about 200 or 300 words, plus, you know, photos that help bring that to life. And we think we probably need about 5 to 20 case studies to kind of do for these really to play that role throughout the toolkit. And it will, so the precise number will depend a little on how many that we collect and those that we do collect and how they fit into the toolkit alongside some of the other content that we're presenting. So just to give you a bit of an overview on the process for developing the case studies, we recognise that you know, sending out requests to kind of provide us with case studies is often a challenge, particularly, you know, people who are perhaps have the richest knowledge to share are very busy and don't necessarily have the time to sit down and write case studies. So what we have decided to do is to try to make life a little easier and give people just some very concrete questions to answer. And so we constructed a survey of NNN members a little while back, and we sent that out, and we asked people to respond to a set of structured questions. We intend to kind of enrich those responses in the survey with some further detail that we'll collect through perhaps having some discussions. But before we get to those interviews, the second step along that journey is this workshop. We're keen to perhaps fill some of the gaps in the case studies that we currently have through your support. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be looking to enrich the information that we have through the surveys through a series of interviews that we'll conduct with people who have indicated that they're willing to showcase their projects. And then there'll be a process of writing those up into those 200 or 300 word case studies and, you know, refining those and drafting those and making sure that the authors, that the people whose projects they are very, very comfortable with what we're representing in those case studies, and ensure that they fit within the toolkit, and ensure that there is some you know, a common voice throughout, so that they read seamlessly from info sheet to info sheet. So we're really grateful for those people that have already come forward and provided us with some case studies. So we have 10 case studies to date, and you'll see some of them when we move on to the next mural board. But I just wanted to highlight, we've done a bit of an analysis of the case studies that we currently have, and there's a few kind of themes emerging. You'll see that we have quite a number of case studies that are Africa focused, and most of the case studies do highlight programs that are focused on either Schisto or STH, with a couple of exceptions. So they are very heavy African, you know, heavily focused on Africa and heavily focused on those couple of diseases. And we would like to have quite a cross section of case studies in the toolkit. So we are looking to see if we can diversify a little in terms of the NTD focus, as well as the region and country of focus. So we'd really love your support to do that. The other thing that we're doing, because we're hoping to kind of weave through the toolkit highlights around, use these toolkits to kind of highlight some of the practice principles and to highlight some of these steps. We have kind of looked at what we do have at the moment and perhaps where there are some gaps, and noting that we have initially undertaken this survey. So there's lots of information that we're lacking about the particular case studies that we have. And so there may be, you know, much more rich information to be gleaned through those interviews. But based on the information that we currently have, we think that there's a couple of gaps. One is around a case study or a number of case studies that help us to highlight that principle of equity, inclusion and non-discrimination, bringing that to life in some case studies, as well as sustainability and adaptive planning and implementation. We'd really love to be able to showcase some of those principles in practice through case studies, but we don't necessarily have the materials to do that at this point. So we'd love to fill those gaps. And similarly, we'll be looking to illustrate some of the process steps using case studies, but perhaps we have some gaps at the moment around steps 4, 5 and 6 and number 9. So Geordie mentioned before that it's not necessarily common practice to develop communications and engagement plans. We'd love to be able to showcase that through a case study if we could. And then some of the earlier case studies as well, developing a logic model to outline an intervention, how it will lead to change, and the inputs that are required to deliver it. We'd love to be able to showcase that in practice, and how projects have understood the assumptions that they're making and use their project as an opportunity to test and learn through project implementation. So we're hoping that you might be able to help us to fill some of the gaps that we have. So we're going to have another breakout session in a moment. And Paris, if you wouldn't mind popping this link in the chat box again, we're going to navigate to our third and last mural board. And we would love to get your input into the case studies. And so we're really keen, if you have some projects that you're involved in or that you are aware of that you think would really be fabulous to include as a case study in this resource, in this toolkit, if you could let us know about that, that would be really great. If you don't, but you have some ideas of ways that we might be able to identify or source some additional case studies, we'd really love to hear your thoughts on that as well. So if you wouldn't mind navigating to the mural board and giving that some thought, we'll give you 5 minutes, and then again we'll have a breakout session to discuss all of this in a little bit more detail. But over to you for 5 minutes. those suggestions coming through. That's super exciting. Thanks. If you could just perhaps finish writing up any final comments that you were making, that would be great. We're going to now break out into 3 groups again. It would be great for us to just have a bit of a discussion around some of those case study suggestions that are coming through. So we're going to, as I said, break up into 3 groups. You'll be ably supported by either Naomi, Kimberly or Geordie. And if you're brave enough, then it would be great if you could perhaps offer to present one of the ideas that you popped on your board. You don't need to speak in too much depth about the project, but if you wouldn't mind giving us a bit of an overview of what the project is that you think might make a great case study, just its title, the country, the NTD are focused, a little bit about the project, just 1 or 2 or 3 minutes. And then the moderator will then ask a couple of questions to draw out a little bit more information about those case studies, and then we'll open it up to the broader group for any further questions that they might have. See how we go. Might have time to discuss 1 project idea, or we might have time for 2. We'll see how we're going for time. But Ros is going to again magically transport us into 3 groups now. Over to you, Ros.
Thank you. Just opening the rooms. Breakout rooms. Breakout rooms are closing in 20 seconds. You should be joined again shortly by your hosts.
Welcome back, everyone. Gosh, time flies when you're having fun. We're nearly at the end of our session. I really appreciate all of the inputs that we've received so far. I think they're going to add enormous value to what we're developing. We really value those contributions. We're just going to spend the next couple of minutes just wrapping up. Unfortunately, we don't have time to hear back from those groups, but looking forward to engaging with all of the sticky notes that you've contributed. I just wanted to highlight that there is still opportunity, as we've kind of suggested, that there is still this opportunity to contribute to this case study series. We're keen to make that as easy as possible for people. We know that it can be difficult to find the time to kind of write things down. So we welcome your contributions in whatever form is easiest for you. We've got this link to the survey that we did put out a little while ago. If you find that answering some structured questions around your project is a good and easy way for you to start to contribute, then please go ahead and do that. Paris, if you wouldn't mind popping this link into the chat box so people can navigate to that, that would be great. Should take probably about 10 to 15 minutes to complete that survey. If you find it's easier to perhaps send us a document or some details in case study form, then we're really happy to receive that. Or if you think it would be easier for you just to talk to us about your project and for us to document information that way, then we're very happy to do that as well. So we're just keen to capture your projects and the great work that's happening, and whatever way we can do that to make that easy for you, we're happy to accommodate. And so just to conclude with a bit of a summary of the next steps for the task team and the development of this work. As we noted earlier, we have a fabulous team of authors who are actively writing up content at the moment. We always welcome additional members to that group. If you are keen to get involved, please reach out to Geordie or myself. We'll be happy to have you. And then there will be this work that's also going on to collate and produce these case studies. And again, if you'd like to get involved in supporting us to develop those, please reach out. There will also be a process of reviewing the materials if you think that you might contribute in that way. Again, really happy to hear from you. And then there will be the publication and launch, of course, and some plans around communications and engagement around the toolkit once we have that ready, probably early in the new year. So as I said, email either myself or Geordie, or reach out to us via the NNN platform if you'd like to have a chat and learn a little bit more about what we're doing or get involved in some way. We would be really keen to hear from you. So thank you very much for all your contributions in the session today. It's been really great, and your inputs will really strengthen the work that we're doing and hopefully ensure that the materials that we're developing are of use to you and to those that you work with. So just a final word of thanks to our fabulous NNN sponsors, and we wish you all the best for the rest of the meeting. Thanks a lot.